The transport shuttle descended through the industrial sprawl of Sector 9, where humanity built its war machines. Ambassador Rill pressed 3 of his sensory stalks against the viewport, watching the construction yards grow. Larger, massive skeletal frameworks hung in the void, surrounded by clouds of welding sparks and fabrication drones. The Veroni had built ships for 6,000 years, perfecting the art of elegant, efficient spacecraft that sliced through space like living things. What Rilth saw below looked more like factories than shipyards. The shuttle pilot, a cheerful human woman named Wilson, noticed his confusion. First time seeing our yards. Yeah, we get that reaction a lot. Rill's translator box crackled. Your methods appear unconventional. That's the polite version, Wilson laughed. Most species call us crazy. Wait till you see the fortress. The shuttle banked toward the largest dock where something waited that defied every principle of proper ship design Rill had ever learned. The UNS Fortress hung in its berth like a floating mountain of metal where Veroni ships curved and flowed. This thing was all angles and slabs, armor plating covered it in layers, each sheet overlapping the next like primitive scales. Gun ports dotted its hull in clusters, and heat radiators stuck out at odd intervals. It looked cobbled together, brutal, wrong. That cannot be a warship, Rill said. Sure is. Newest battle cruiser in the fleet. Wilson brought the shuttle around for docking. She's a beauty, isn't she? Rill said. Nothing his home world's equivalent of beautiful involved symmetry, grace, and mathematical perfection. This vessel had none of those qualities. It had mass, it had armor, it had the aesthetic appeal of an industrial waste compactor. Commander Patricia Gray waited in the docking bay. She was tall for a human, with silver hair tied back in the kind of steady gaze that suggested she had seen too much to be impressed by visiting dignitaries. She offered her hand in the human greeting gesture. Ambassador Rill, welcome aboard the Fortress. I understand you're here to evaluate our construction methods. The Galactic Coalition wishes to ensure resources are being allocated efficiently, Rill replied, his translator rendering his chemical signals into flat words. Your species joined our defensive pact 3 years ago. Your shipbuilding requests have been substantial. We build them tough. Gray started walking and Rill followed. The corridor was wide enough to drive vehicles through. I'm guessing your report will question why we use so much material. A Vanny cruiser of equivalent mass carries 30% more weapons and generates 42% more speed. Your design philosophy wastes resources that could save lives. Gray stopped at a bulkhead door. It was thick, really thick, with heavy mechanical locks and what looked like emergency sealant dispensers on both sides. She palmed the access panel. Question for you, Ambassador. When your ships get hit, what happens? Our shield matrices absorb energy damage. Our hulls are reinforced with reactive polymers that distribute kinetic impacts. We maneuver to avoid concentrated fire, and when that fails, Rill's stalks twitched. It rarely fails. Veroni tactical doctrine emphasizes not being where the enemy fires, but when it does fail. Gray pressed. What happens? The bulkhead opened. Beyond it lay a cross-section view of the ship's outer hull through an observation window. Rill could see the layers, 3 separate hull plates, each thick enough to stop a missile with gap spaces between them. When it fails, the Ship is damaged, Rill admitted. Shields. Drop hull breaches occur, the vessel must withdraw for repairs. Exactly, Gray pointed at the triple layered armor. We don't build ships assuming our defenses will work. We build them assuming our defenses will fail, because eventually they always do. And when they fail, we want our people to survive. Rill examined the construction. Each armor layer had its own structural supports, its own seal system. If the outer layer breached, the middle layer would hold. If that failed, the inner layer remained. It was redundant to an absurd degree. This is paranoid engineering, he said. It's practical engineering. Gray started walking again. Last year the destroyer Swift Current took a plasma torpedo to its port quarter, single hit. The blast penetrated their efficient hull design and vented 3 decks to space. 90 crew dead in 6 seconds. Ship barely made it to repair station. They entered an elevator that descended into the ship's interior. The walls here were just as thick as the outer corridors. 2 months ago, the UNS Gibraltar took 4 plasma torpedoes in the same general area. Know what happened? Outer armor ablated, middle layer held. The ship sealed the damaged compartments. Our root systems threw backup conduits and stayed in the fight. 0 casualties. The Gibraltar is already back on patrol. The elevator stopped. They emerged into what looked like a equipment storage bay, except every piece of machinery had a duplicate next to it, and sometimes a triplicate. Your redundancy extends to everything, Rill observed. Everything. Gray walked to a power distribution node. This junction has 3 separate feed lines from 3 different reactors. Each line can handle full load. If 2 fail, we're still operational. See that conduit bundle? She pointed up. 7 independent data pathways. An enemy would have to cut through all 7 to disrupt communications, and even then we have wireless backups in a separate fiber system. The resource expenditure must be enormous. It is. This ship cost 3 times what a coalition equivalent would cost. Gray's expression didn't change. But here's the thing, Ambassador. We've lost exactly 2 capital ships in the last 3 years. Your Varani consortium has lost 9. The Thelian Alliance has lost 14. Our ships cost more to build, but we don't have to build replacements every time there's a battle. Rill processed this. His government had indeed commissioned 7 new cruisers in the past 2 years, replacing losses. The humans had commissioned 3 new ships total, all expansions of their fleet rather than replacements. Your philosophy is to absorb damage rather than avoid it. Our philosophy is that battles are chaos, plans fail, systems malfunction, enemies get lucky. When everything goes wrong, we want our ships to still be fighting. Gray started back toward the elevator. The tours just starting. Ambassador, you wanted to see why we build differently. I'm going to show you exactly why. Every plate, every backup system, and every redundant component matters. The ship's intercom crackled. Commander Gray to the bridge. Priority alert. Gray tapped her communicator. Nature of alert: distress call from outpost Meridian, pirate raid in progress. Multiple civilian casualties. We're closest responder. Gray looked at Rilth. Want to see what this expensive, inefficient, paranoid design can actually do in real conditions? Rill stalks quivered with anticipation. And dread, I believe that would be educational. Then hold on, Ambassador. Gray moved toward the bridge at a run. You're about to learn why we build them tough. Outpost Meridian burned in the darkness. Through the bridge view screen, Rill could see atmosphere venting from 3 of the station's habitat rings, glowing. Trails of frozen air crystals marking where holes had been punctured. 12 Raider ships circled the outpost like scavengers, their weapons fire painting the void with streaks of plasma and kinetic rounds. Captain Diana Foster stood at the command center, her fingers dancing across tactical displays. She looked younger than Gray, maybe 30 human years, with dark hair and the kind of calm that came from either experience or sociopathy. Rill hoped it was the former. Situation, Foster said. A lieutenant responded immediately. 12 confirmed. Raiders mixed classes, station shields at 40% and falling, estimate 600. Civilians still aboard, 2 Varani light cruisers responding, ETA 12 minutes. We're 4 minutes out. Weapon status, all batteries charged and ready, missile tubes loaded, point defense online. Foster glanced at Rill, who had been given an observer seat near the rear of the bridge. Ambassador, you might want to strap in. This could get rough. Rill secured himself in the human-sized chair. What is your tactical approach? The direct one. Foster turned back to her. Displays. Navigation, plot and intercept. Course, put our bow toward the largest concentration of raiders. Engineering. Redirect auxiliary power to forward. Armor heating elements. The fortress began to accelerate through the view screen. Rill watched the raider formation grow larger. They had clearly noticed the human battle cruisers approach. 3 of them broke off from the station and turned to intercept. They're targeting us. The weapons officer reported. Threat assessment shows concentrated plasma cannons and mass drivers. Good, Foster said. Means they're not shooting the station. Maintain course and speed. Rill's translator struggled with human idiom. You want them to shoot you? That's exactly what I want. Foster pulled up a damage prediction model. Their heaviest weapons will score the outer armor and maybe breach the first layer if they get lucky. The station's shields are nearly depleted. Those same hits would kill civilians, so yes. Ambassador, I want them shooting at us. Instead, the first raider opened fire at extreme range. Plasma bolts crossed the distance in seconds, impacting the fortresses. Bow, the bridge shook slightly less than Rill expected. Damage displays showed the impacts as yellow marks on the ship's schematic, indicating outer armor damage only. Forward armor holding. The engineering officer reported. Temperature rising within acceptable parameters. Ablative layer performing as designed. 2 more raiders joined the barrage. The fortress shuddered with each impact but maintained course and acceleration. Rill watched the damage indicators climb from yellow to orange in several forward sections. The raiders were scoring hits, burning through the outer armor layer in concentrated spots. Any Vanny ship would have maneuvered by now, using speed to throw off targeting solutions. The fortress just kept coming, absorbing punishment like it didn't matter. Forward armor at 70% in sections 9 through 14. Engineering called out. Second layer exposed in section 11. Acknowledged. Aru heating elements to compensate. Foster checked their closing speed. Weapons prepare broadside. We're going in close. The tactical officer looked uncertain. Ma'am, broadside. Formation exposes our lateral surfaces. We'll be presenting a larger target. Profile. That's the idea. They can shoot at all. That armor while we shoot back with everything we've got. Foster smiled. Without humor, trust the ship. Lieutenant, she can take it. The fortress rotated as it closed, presenting its entire port side to the enemy. Gunports opened along the length of the hull, dozens of them. Missile tubes extended. The ship went from streamlined battering ram to floating weapons platform in seconds. All weapons free fire, target priority. Anything shooting at the station. The fortress opened up with everything. Rail guns sent hypersonic slugs down range. Missile pods rippled, fired, launching smart munitions that spiraled toward targets. Energy weapons drew bright lines across space. The broadside was devastating, a wall of firepower that the Varani could never match because they needed that mass allocation for engines and shields. 3 raiders took direct hits and went dark, their power systems catastrophically failing. A 4th lost its port side entirely to a rail gun strike. The remaining raiders scattered, some fleeing, others trying to establish better firing positions. But they kept shooting at the fortress, just like Foster wanted. Plasma and kinetic rounds hammered the human ship from multiple angles. Now Rilth watched the damage displays light up across the entire port side. Orange sections turned red. Breach alarm sounded. Hull breach. Section 43. Automatic seals engaged. Damage control teams responding. The engineering officer sounded calm despite the alerts. Hull breach. Section 51. Seals engaged. Hull breach. Section 62. Seals engaged. Casualties? Foster asked. 0. All breach sections were evacuated per automatic protocol. Crew relocated to secondary stations. Rill couldn't believe what he was seeing. The ship had taken enough damage to mission kill a coalition cruiser, and the crew was reporting it like minor system alerts. 3 separate hull breaches and nobody had died. The fortress fired again. Another raider disappeared in an explosion. The remaining attackers broke formation and ran, activating emergency FTL jumps that would strain their systems but get them away from this monster that refused to stop fighting. Cease fire, let them go. Foster surveyed the tactical display. Station status. Meridian reports critical system stable. They're sealing the damaged sections now. Medical teams are handling casualties, but the raid is over. Good. Foster turned to the damage control display. Engineering full report. Outer armor destroyed or heavily damaged across 40% of port side. Middle armor layer exposed in 18 sections. Breached in 3. Inner armor untouched. We've got compartment seals holding on. 3 breaches. Minor atmosphere loss before containment. Backup systems activated in 7 areas where primary conduits were severed. Overall combat effectiveness at 94%. 94%. After taking what looked like a sustained demolition attack, the ship was at 94% effectiveness. Foster noticed Rill's expression. Ambassador, you look disturbed. You were hit 17 times, Rill said. I counted 17 direct impacts. Some of them penetrated your hull. By all tactical doctrine, I know you should be retreating for emergency repairs. We've got 3 layers of hull. They only got through 2 of them in a couple Spots. Foster brought up a repair timeline. Damage control estimates we'll have the breaches fully patched in 6 hours. The armor will take longer, maybe 2 days for temporary repairs, but we can fight right now if we need to. The 2 Veroni cruisers dropped out of FTL. Nearby, their sleek forms pristine and undamaged. They had arrived too late for the fight, but early enough to see its aftermath. Foster opened a channel. Veroni ships. This is UNS Fortress. Area is secure. Station is stable. We're beginning damage control operations. The Veroni captain responded with barely concealed shock. Fortress, we're reading multiple hull breaches on your vessel. Do you require assistance? Negative, we're fine, just a few scratches. Rill stared at the damage display. Those weren't scratches, those were wounds. That would have killed his people, but the Fortress crew was already working, sealing breaches, rerouting systems, preparing to continue their patrol. They had taken the hits meant for softer targets and survived. That was the point. That had always been the point. Foster met his gaze. Still think we're building them wrong, Ambassador. Rill had no answer. Chief Engineer Lucas. Raymond looked like he had crawled out of a reactor core. Grease stained his uniform. His hands were wrapped in temporary medical gel from minor burns, and he smiled like someone who had just solved a complicated puzzle. He met Rill in the damaged section 43, where repair crews swarmed over the whole breach like organized insects. Ambassador Commander, Gray said you wanted to see the repair operations. Raymond gestured at the chaos around them. Welcome to the fun part. The breach was 3 m across, ragged hole where plasma had burned through 2 armor layers and into the interior compartment. The edges glowed faintly, still radiating heat, but already temporary seals had been deployed. Atmosphere had been restored to the surrounding areas, and crews in heavy work suits were installing permanent patches. Rill approached the damaged section carefully. Through the hole he could see the middle armor layer twisted and melted. Beyond that, the outer layer was simply gone, vaporized by concentrated fire. This damage would take weeks to repair in our facilities, Rill said. Yeah, if you had to replace the whole section, sure. Raymond pulled up holographic schematic. But watch this. See those panels the crew is installing? They're not replacements, they're mechanical bridges. We bolt them over the damaged area, seal them, and reinforce from behind. The ship doesn't need to look pretty, it needs to hold pressure and stop the next hit. As Rill watched 4 crew members maneuvered a prefabricated panel into position, it looked nothing like the original armor, just a flat plate of reinforced alloy. With mounting brackets, they secured it with heavy bolts, applied sealant, then tested it with pressure sensors. Seal holding, one of them reported. Moving to reinforcement phase. More crew arrived with structural supports, welding them behind the patch to distribute stress. The entire process took maybe 20 minutes, and when they finished, the breach was closed. Not elegant, not original specification, but functional. That's a temporary fix, Rill said. Temporary is a relative term. Raymond led him to another section where crews worked on damaged systems. That patch will hold for months if we need it to. When we get back to a proper shipyard, yeah, we'll cut it out and install proper armor, but until then it works. That's the beauty of our design philosophy. Everything is modular. Everything can be jury-rigged. We don't need perfection, We need function. They passed through a corridor where exposed conduits ran along the ceiling, bypassing a damaged junction box. Raymond pointed up at them. See that? Primary power conduit got severed during the fight. Instead of shutting down this whole section, we ran a temporary line from the secondary grid. Took about 5 minutes. The section never lost power. The crew never had to evacuate, and we kept fighting. Rill's engineering background weird with what he was seeing. This was messy, inelegant, almost primitive, but it worked. The ship had taken catastrophic damage by Coalition standards and had adapted in real time. How many backup systems does this vessel have? He asked. Raymond laughed. How much time do you have? Seriously though, we've got redundancy on top of redundancy. Take life support. We've got 3 independent air recycling systems, 4 separate water purification plants, emergency oxygen stored in 30 different compartments throughout the ship. If half the ship lost power completely, the other half could sustain the entire crew. For 2 weeks, they entered the main engineering bay where the ship's reactor cores hummed with barely contained power. 3 massive cylinders dominated the space, each one capable of powering the entire ship alone. Why 3 reactors? Rill asked. One would suffice. One would suffice until it failed. Raymond walked to the nearest reactor, running his hand along its casing with something like affection. We run on 2 reactors normally, keeping the third hot standby. If one goes down, we switch to the backup before most systems even notice the change. If 2 go down, we run on the third and activate emergency protocols. And before you ask, yes, each reactor has its own cooling system, its own fuel supply, its own control network. The resource allocation seems excessive. The survival rate seems excellent. Raymond pulled up performance statistics. Human capital ships 89%. Survival rate in major engagements over the last decade. Coalition averaged 34%. Our ships cost more, but we're not replacing them constantly, and more importantly, our crews come home. Real. Examine the statistics. The numbers were difficult to argue with. Human ships survived at rates that seemed impossible given the amount of combat they saw. Raymond continued. Want to know the real secret? It's not just the redundancy, it's the design philosophy behind it. Every system on the ship was designed by someone who assumed it would fail at the worst possible moment, so they built in failure modes, backup activation, alternative pathways. When something breaks, the ship doesn't ask, what now? It already knows what now. It automatically reroutes, activates backups, seals compartments, whatever needs to happen. He led Rill to a damage control station where displays showed the entire ship's status in real time. Yellow and orange indicators marked damaged systems, but green pathways showed how the ship had compensated for each one. Look at this. Section 43 lost primary power, so it switched to secondary. Section 51's environmental controls got fried, so life support are routed through Section 50. Section 62's communication array got destroyed, so the network mesh automatically redistributed the load to adjacent arrays. The crew didn't have to make those decisions. The ship made them automatically because we designed it to survive damage, not avoid it. Automatic repair systems hummed in the walls around them. Rill could hear the sound of fabricators producing replacement Components, the hiss of sealant. Dispensers, the clank of damage control. Robots moving through the infrastructure. Your ships are self-healing, he realized. To a degree, yes, we can't fix everything automatically, but we can stabilize most damage long enough for crews to apply proper repairs. Raymond checked his data pad. Current estimate. We'll be back to 80% combat. Effectiveness in 18 hours, full repairs. We'll take a week at a shipyard, but we could fight another battle right now if we had to. Rill thought about the Vanny cruiser Swift Current, still in dry dock. 3 months after taking a single hit, he thought about coalition shipyards running at maximum capacity, trying to replace lost vessels. He thought about the elegant, efficient ships his people built and how many of them never came home. We've been building ships wrong, he said quietly. Raymond shrugged. You've been building them for different priorities: speed, firepower, efficiency, all good things. But we build for the worst day possible, and then we make sure our people survive. The deck shuddered slightly as another patch was welded into place. Still think we're paranoid? Raymond asked. I think you're prepared, Rill admitted. There's a difference. Mess hall was busier than Rill expected. For a ship that had just survived a battle, human crew members filled the space, eating, talking, laughing. Some had bandages, a few showed signs of minor injuries, but the atmosphere was relaxed, almost casual. On a Virani vessel after combat, crew would be in their quarters processing trauma, reviewing their performance for errors. Commander Gray sat across from Rill with a tray of food that smelled vaguely toxic. Humans had strange dietary requirements. You seem surprised by the crew's mood. Gray said they nearly died. Multiple hull breaches sustained combat against superior numbers, yet they behave as though nothing significant occurred. Gray bit into something that crunched. We took some hits and sent the raiders running. That's a win. Why wouldn't we be in good spirits? The damage to your vessel was severe. The damage was expected. Gray sat down her food. Ambassador, can I tell you about human naval history, specifically a battle from about 400 years ago, back when we only fought each other? Rill settled into his seat. Human historical lectures could be lengthy, but they often revealed important cultural context. The Battle of Guadalcanal, Second World War. Fleets met at night in confined waters. The fighting was brutal, close range, chaotic. Ships on both sides took catastrophic damage. One vessel, the USS San Francisco, took 45 hits. 45. Her bridge was destroyed. Her admiral was killed. Her captain was killed. Fires burned throughout the ship. By any reasonable standard, she should have sunk. Gray pulled up historical images on her data pad. Rilf saw a primitive waterborne vessel, its superstructure mangled and burned. But she didn't sink. Her crew kept fighting. They steered from a backup position. They fired their guns manually. When the automated systems failed, they controlled the flooding, contained the fires, and got their ship home. 77 crew died that night, but over 600 survived because the ship refused to quit. The images show the damaged vessel limping into port, listing but a float. That was with primitive materials, steel and rivets. No automation, no self-sealing compartments, no redundant systems, just human engineering and human stubbornness. Gray met Rill's gaze. Now imagine what we can do with modern materials, and 4 centuries of accumulated lessons. That's why this crew is relaxed. They know the ship can take the punishment. They trust the design. Rill gestured at the crew around them. This trust seems absolute. It's earned. Every system on this ship has been tested to destruction and beyond. We know exactly how much damage each component can sustain. We know which failures cascade and which ones isolate. We know this because we deliberately broke things during testing. To find out, a young crew member approached wearing an engineering division uniform. Commander, we've completed the Section 43 permanent repairs ahead of schedule. Outstanding work. Tell your team well done. The crew member grinned and left. Gray turned back to Rill. See that ahead of schedule, because our repair procedures assume worst-case scenarios, when reality is better than worst case. We finish early. When it's actually worst case, we finish on time. We're never behind because we never underestimate the problem. Your entire culture seems built around pessimism. Realism, Gray corrected. We're optimistic about human capability. We're realistic about everything else. Things break, people make mistakes, enemies get lucky. Physics doesn't care about your plans, so we design for Murphy's Law. I am unfamiliar with this law. Old engineering principle. Whatever can go wrong will go wrong at the worst possible time. If you design assuming Murphy's Law, you build in counter measures for everything, which brings us back to the fortress. Gray finished her meal. This ship embodies centuries of Murphy's Law applied to naval architecture. Every redundant system, every backup, every oversized component exists because at some point in human history that thing failed and people died. We remember those failures. We learned from them. Real thought about his own people's approach to ship design. They emphasized theoretical optimization, computer modeling, efficiency calculations. When ships were lost, they analyzed the tactical decisions, not the engineering ones. The ships themselves were assumed to be fine. It was the crews who had failed to use them properly. The coalition builds ships as tools, he said slowly. You build them as protectors. We build them as partners. Gray stood, gesturing for Rill to follow. Come on, I want to show you something. They walked through corridors that were already returning to normal. Repair crews had cleaned up most of the battle damage visible from main passages. Temporary patches covered the worst areas. The ship felt solid, stable, alive in a way Rill hadn't expected from a vessel that had been burning and venting atmosphere. A few hours ago, Gray led him to a small memorial chamber near the ship center. The walls were covered with names, thousands of them etched into metal plates. Every human ship that was lost in the last 2 centuries, Gray explained. Every crew member who didn't come home, we remember them all. The UNS Valiant lost with all hands when a reactor breach cascaded through inadequate containment. The UNS Defender destroyed when a single hit penetrated to the magazine. The UNS Guardian, which broke apart when structural supports failed under stress. She touched one of the names gently. Each loss taught us something. The Valiant's loss gave us triple redundant reactor containment. The Defender's death gave us distributed ammunition storage. The Guardian's failure gave us reinforced structural members at every stress point. This memorial isn't just about honoring the dead, it's about making sure they didn't die for nothing. Rill examined the names. So many ships. So many people, each one a lesson. Learned you carry your failures with you, he observed. We carry our lessons with you, Gray. Said there's a difference. The Coalition treats ship losses as acceptable statistics. We treat them as preventable tragedies, every name on this wall represents someone who should have come home but didn't, so we build the next ship tougher, we add another backup system, we thicken the armor. Another layer, we make it harder for Murphy's Law to kill our people. She turned to face Rill directly. That's why our ships look like mobile fortresses. Instead of elegant cruisers, every ugly plate, every redundant system, every oversized component is there because someone died when we didn't have it. We build them tough because we remember what happens when we don't. The memorial chamber was quiet except for the ever-present hum of the ship systems, all those backups, all those redundancies, all working together to keep the crew alive. The Coalition needs to learn this, Rill said. Yes, Gray agreed. They do. The alert came 6 days later while the fortress was still completing repairs at the orbital station above New Edinburgh. Rill was in his assigned quarters, reviewing his preliminary report for the Coalition Council when the ship's alarm system activated, not the urgent combat warning, but the general quarters alert. That meant something serious was developing. He made his way to the bridge where Captain Foster was already coordinating with Coalition Command. The main view screen showed a tactical display of the Epsilon Reach border zone where humanity's territory met the edge of the Kryn Dominion. Situation is evolving, Foster said. Noticing Rill's arrival, Kryn fleet crossed the border 2 hours ago, 60+ warships, mixed classes. They're pushing toward the mining colonies in the Gamma sector. The Coalition is responding. Rila asked, everyone who can get there is going. We're looking at maybe 40 Coalition ships total, including us. Foster studied the force composition. We're outgunned, but the terrain favors defense, asteroid fields, gravity wells, sensor interference. If we position correctly, we can force them into kill zones. Rill examined the tactical map. The Kryn were a warrior species, aggressive and technologically advanced. Their ships were built for overwhelming offense with massive weapons arrays and powerful engines. In open battle they could devastate most Coalition vessels. What is your assigned position? He asked. Foster smiled without humor. Coalition Command wants us to hold the center line. We're the anchor point, the mobile stronghold that doesn't move. The fortress departed the station with an hour still bearing visible scars from the pirate engagement. Repair crews had restored combat effectiveness to 96%, but the cosmetic damage remained. Scorched armor, temporary patches, and the rough appearance of a ship that had been through hell and kept fighting. The journey to Epsilon Reach took 4 hours at maximum FTL. When they dropped into normal space, the Coalition fleet was already forming up. Rilth watched through the bridge view screen as sleek Varani cruisers took up flanking positions. Thelian destroyers formed a fast response group, and various other species contributed their vessels to the defensive line, and in the center the fortress settled into position like a mountain that had decided to float. All stations report status, Foster ordered. The responses came quickly. Weapons Charged shields at maximum damage. Control teams ready, medical bay. Prepared for casualties, every system. Green, every backup system standing by. Enemy fleet entering sensor range, the tactical officer announced, confirmed. 63R vessels, they're maintaining. Formation advancing at steady pace. Foster opened a fleet-wide channel. All coalition ships, this is Fortress. Actual. We're going to give them something to shoot at, use us as cover. And rally point, when they commit to attacking our position, hit them from the flanks. Will hold the line, Captain. Whereath of the Varan cruiser. Swiftwind responded, Fortress, that's a suicide position you'll take. Concentrated fire from their entire fleet, that's the idea, Fortress out. The Kryn fleet came on like a wave of steel and fire. Their formation was tight, disciplined, clearly designed for breakthrough tactics. They would concentrate force on a single point, shatter the defense, and pour through the gap. Foster had no intention of shattering. All power to forward shields and armor. Angle the bow toward their main force. Lock down all non-essential systems, and redirect to defensive grid. She turned to Rill. Ambassador, you should move to the auxiliary bridge. It's deeper in the ship, more protected. I will observe from here, Rill said. I need to see this. Your choice, strap in tight. The Kryn opened fire at extreme range. Energy beams and missiles crossed the void, targeting the obvious center point of the coalition defense, the Fortress. Impacts registered across the bow, shields flaring bright as they absorbed the initial barrage. Forward shields at 80%, the defensive officer reported, holding steady. More fire came in. The Kryn were testing the human ship's defenses, probing for weaknesses. They found armor instead. Layer after layer of it, backed by structural reinforcement that had been designed specifically for this kind of punishment. They're concentrating fire, tactical. Announced. 20 vessels targeting a position. Good means they're not shooting at our friends. Foster watched the enemy advance. All coalition ships prepare. Flanking maneuver, wait for my signal. The Kryn pressed closer, their formation tightening as they prepared for the killing blow. 20 ships became 30 there. Combined firepower hammering at the Fortress like an industrial forge. Shields collapsed under the sustained assault. Armor began to ablate, outer layers burning away under concentrated plasma fire. Inside the ship, the crew worked with mechanical precision. Damn it. Reports flowed in. Automated systems compensated. Backup power are routed to weakened sections. The Fortress absorbed punishment that would have destroyed any other coalition vessel and translated it into tactical advantage. Now, Foster said quietly, then louder. All coalition ships execute flanking maneuver. Hit them from both sides. Coalition fleet moved as one. Veroni. Cruisers came screaming in from port, their weapons tearing into the Kryn. Formations exposed flank. Theon. Destroyers struck from starboard fast and deadly. The Kryn had committed so heavily to destroying the Fortress that they had left themselves vulnerable everywhere else. And the Fortress still burning, still being hammered by a dozen enemy warships opened fire. The broadside was devastating. Every weapon on the port side fired simultaneously, targeting the Kryn ships that had closed to point blank range. Railgun rounds punched through shields. Missiles found gaps in armor. Energy weapons carved molten channels through hull plating. 3. Kryn destroyers went dark immediately. Cruiser lost its engines and went spinning into the asteroid field. Kryn formation wavered, torn between the dying target in front of them and the fresh threats on their flanks. Hull breaches on multiple decks, engineering reported seals holding, rerouting around. Damaged sections, combat effectiveness at 81%. Maintain fire, don't let them regroup. The battle became chaos. The Kryn had expected to break through and were unprepared for a defense that refused to break. The fortress sat in the center of the maelstrom, bleeding atmosphere and radiating heat, but still fighting. Coalition ships used it as exactly what Foster had promised, a rally point in shield. Enemy flagship moving to intercept us. Tactical called out. She's massive. Probably twice our displacement. Rill could see it on the view screen. Dreadnought-class vessel that made even. The fortress looked small. It was coming straight at them, weapons charging for what would clearly be an overwhelming strike. Navigation intercept course. Match their heading. Foster's voice was ice cold. If they want to trade hits with a human ship, let's see who breaks first. Captain, collision warning. The navigation officer said, I know. Maintain course. All hands brace for impact. Rill understood suddenly what was happening. The fortress wasn't going to dodge, it was going to ram. The two ships closed at combat speed, weapons firing the entire time. The Kryn dreadnoughts opening salvo tore through the fortress's weakened shields and carved deep into the bow armor. The human ship shuddered, alert, screaming, but kept coming. The impact was cataclysmic. Metal screamed as two massive vessels collided in the void. The Kryn dreadnought, built for firepower and speed, crumpled like paper where the fortress's reinforced bow struck it. The human ship's momentum carried it forward, grinding through the enemy vessels. Superrupture. The fortress's bow was destroyed, armor shattered, internal compartments exposed to vacuum, but behind that destroyed section the middle layer held. Behind that the inner layer remained intact. The ship's critical systems were deep inside, protected by exactly this kind of catastrophic damage. The cringe dreadnought broke apart. Reverse thrust get us clear. Foster scanned the damage reports. Engineering status. Both sections completely destroyed. We've lost forward missile tubes, primary sensor array, and about 60 m of actual ship. Sealing all affected compartments now. Power systems intact. Engines intact. After weapons intact, we can still fight. The remaining Kryn ships, having watched their flagship die, began to retreat. The coalition fleet pursued, harrying them back toward the border. Foster sat back in her chair. Stand down from general quarters. Damage control begin. Primary assessment. Rill looked at the damage display. The fortress had lost its entire bow. Third of the ship was simply gone, and the crew was calmly discussing repairs. You're insane, he said. We are prepared, Foster corrected. There's a difference. The Galactic Coalition Council chamber was built to impress, with soaring ceilings and holographic displays that could show data from 1,000 worlds simultaneously. Representatives from 40 species sat in concentric rings, each in their customized environment pods. At the center, a projection stage allowed speakers to address the entire assembly. Rill stood on that stage, his sensory stalk steady despite the weight of what he was about to say. 3 weeks had Passed since the Battle of Epsilon. Reach 3 weeks of analyzing data, reviewing reports and fundamentally reconsidering everything he thought he knew about naval warfare. Honored representatives, he began his translator, rendering his chemical signals into words every species could understand. I was sent to evaluate human shipbuilding methods with the expectation that I would recommend resource reallocation. Instead, I am here to recommend that we fundamentally change how the coalition builds warships. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Thelian Representative Council member Voss activated his speaking privileges. Ambassador Rill, are you suggesting we adopt human construction methods? Their ships cost 3 times our standard vessels. I am suggesting we adopt human survival methods, Rill replied, and yes, initial costs are higher, but let me present the comparative data. He activated the holographic displays. Numbers filled the air, cold and undeniable. In the last 5 years, the coalition has lost 137 capital ships in combat. Humanity has lost 4. Our replacement costs have exceeded 2 trillion credits. Human replacement costs minimal because they rarely need replacements. More numbers appeared. Crew survival rates, mission success percentages, time between repairs, combat effectiveness, duration. Human ships survive battles that would destroy ours not because their weapons are superior, not because their shields are stronger, but because they are built expecting to be damaged, and they have systems in place to survive that damage. He showed footage from the fortress, the sections where hull breaches had been sealed in minutes, where backup systems had activated automatically, where the crew had continued fighting despite catastrophic damage. Coalition doctrine emphasizes not being hit. Human doctrine accepts that being hit is inevitable and plans accordingly. When our ships lose shields, they are vulnerable. When human ships lose shields, they still have 3 layers of armor. When our ships lose primary power, they go dark. When human ships lose primary power, they switch to secondary, then tertiary, then emergency systems. Council member Vosh was not convinced. This seems like an overcomplicated approach. Our ships are elegant, efficient. Human ships are crude, wasteful. I thought the same thing, Rill admitted. Then I watched a human battle cruiser ram an enemy dreadnought, lose its entire forward section and continue fighting. I watched it take damage that would mission kill any coalition vessel and treat it as a minor inconvenience. That is not crude. That is deliberate. He changed the display to show design schematics comparing a Vanny cruiser to a human equivalent. Yes, human ships dedicate more mass to armor and redundancy, but consider a Vanny cruiser that takes critical damage must withdraw for weeks of repairs. Human ship takes that same damage, seals it, routes around it, and continues its mission, which is actually more efficient. The ship that must retreat, or the ship that keeps fighting. Commander Gray stepped onto the stage. Beside Rill, she had been invited to provide technical testimony. The council should understand, Gray said, that human design philosophy comes from experience. We have a saying: battle plans never survive first contact with the enemy. We build our ships knowing that everything will go wrong. Systems will fail, armor will be penetrated, crew will be injured, and we design so that when those things happen, The ship survives. She pulled up historical data from human naval warfare, centuries of accumulated knowledge. Every redundant system, every backup, every overbuilt component exists because at some point someone died when we didn't have it. We remember those deaths, we learn from them. Coalition treats ship losses as statistics. We treat them as preventable tragedies. The Theon representative was unmoved. Sentiment is admirable, but war is about numbers, resources, efficiency. Then let us discuss numbers, Rill said sharply. The Battle of Epsilon Reach. Coalition forces 40 ships, Kryn forces 63 ships. By standard calculations, we should have been destroyed. Instead, we won. Why? Because one human ship accepted damage meant for the entire fleet and survived it. He showed the battle footage, the fortress under concentrated fire, absorbing punishment, while coalition ships struck from advantageous positions. That single vessel took hits from over 30 enemy warships. Any coalition ship would have been destroyed in the first 5 minutes. The fortress fought for 2 hours and rammed an enemy flagship at the end. It lost significant structure but remained combat effective. That is not inefficiency, that is force multiplication. Captain Foster appeared on the communication channel from the fortress, which was currently in dry dock, undergoing extensive repairs. Council members, she said, I want to be clear about something. We do not build ships this way because we enjoy taking damage. We build them this way because we have learned that no amount of speed or shields will prevent you from being hit eventually. When that happens, you have 2 choices, die or survive. We choose survival. She brought up statistics that Rill had helped compile. Human ships cost more initially, but we calculate cost differently. We measure value in crew returned alive in missions completed in battles won despite unfavorable odds. By those metrics, our ships are extremely cost-effective. The chamber fell quiet. Representatives consulted data streams, ran their own calculations, discussed among themselves in a dozen different languages and communication methods. Finally, the council speaker, an ancient Valyrian whose species had been space faring for 10,000 years, activated the main speaking privileges. This council has witnessed many approaches to ship design over the millennia. The human approach is unusual, but the data is compelling. The Valyrian paused. We cannot ignore an 89% survival rate when our own average is 34%. Ambassador Rill, what are your specific recommendations? Rill had prepared for this. Begin integration of human design principles into coalition vessels, not a complete redesign, but adoption of key concepts, redundant systems, modular construction, compartmentalization, layered armor, build ships that can be damaged and continue fighting. This will require significant resource reallocation. Vosh protested. It will require significant resource investment. Rill corrected, but it will save resources in the long term. Fewer replacement ships, fewer memorial services, fewer colonies left undefended because their protection died in the first salvo. Gray added, we are willing to share our construction techniques, our design philosophy, our hard-learned lessons. We will provide engineering teams to assist coalition shipyards. We will train your designers in redundancy principles, but Understand, this is not about copying human ships, it is about learning why we build them the way we do. The vote took 3 hours. In the end, the resolution passed with 78% support. Coalition shipyards would begin integrating human survival principles into their designs. New vessels would incorporate redundant systems, improved armor schemes, and modular construction techniques. After the session, Rill found Gray and Foster in one of the observation lounges, watching ships move through the station. Traffic patterns. Your people changed our entire approach to naval warfare in 3 weeks, Rill said. We just showed you what we learned over centuries of killing each other. Gray replied, every human ship is a lesson written in the blood of people who died. When the ships weren't tough enough, we build them the way we do because we remember. Foster pointed at the fortress, visible in its repair dock. The bow was being completely reconstructed, new armor being layered on, new systems being installed. She'll be better when we're done. Tougher. We learned from this battle. 2. Found some weak points we didn't know about. The next version will fix them. You never stop improving. Rill observed, we never stop learning. Foster said that is the real secret, not the armor or the backups or the redundancy. It is the willingness to accept that we can always build them better. We can always bring more people home. The fortress hung in its dock, scarred and magnificent, a monument to the idea that survival was not luck but design. Around it, coalition ships moved, and on some of them modification orders were already being implemented. Extra armor here, redundant systems. There are small changes that would save lives. Rill watched the ships and thought about the memorial chamber aboard the fortress. All those names, all those lessons. Build them tough, he said quietly. Bring them home. Gray finished. The philosophy was spreading, one ship at a time, one backup system at a time, one layer of armor at a time. The coalition was learning what humans had known for centuries. Hope is not a strategy, but preparation is, and when you build expecting the worst, you survive to see the best.